everyone. Welcome to what is a little bit different of a Birds Meet webinar. So thank you all for being here and joining us. I'm just admitting the last few people from the lobby now, and then we'll get started. So before I begin, I wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that I'm calling from, so the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I think tonight we have a really nice opportunity to appreciate the beauty of nature and bird life, and it's a really nice way of connecting to country and what country brings us. So I'm very excited about that. So we're doing something a little bit different, and I'm joined by Jane Rusden, who's been a long time stalwart of bird life, and she's also an incredibly talented artist. And she's a Castlemaine-based artist, and she often does nature journaling and other kind of wilderness and adventure inspired art. So I've wrangled her along tonight to talk us through a bird portrait. So we've never done anything like this before. Often we do a lot of science communication or other kinds of things. So I hope everyone who has come along has access to either watercolors or any other kinds of media that work for them, and an optimistic spirit, because we haven't done this before. So who knows what could go wrong. And I also have our urban manager, Holly, on the call with us, and she's going to be joining along. So I'm sure we'll get the opportunity to share our masterpieces, or not masterpieces, as they go. But Jane, did you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work before we get started?
All right, yeah. Hi, I'm Jane Rusden, and I've got to be careful not to bump my camera. Yeah, I live on a bush block near Castlemaine, and so I am very lucky because I get to watch birds a lot. And I'm convener of BirdLife Castlemaine District. I also have a science background, so I run nature journaling, which is where we sit in the bush and take a deep dive into nature, and we write and draw and paint, and get creative with ways of using creative ways to explore nature, and that sort of mushes the art and science together quite nicely for me. And because I'm obsessed with birds, probably like a lot of people here tonight, I do like to paint them as well. So I got into bird photography because I wanted to paint the birds that I saw on my travels and at home. And so I use my own photos to paint from, because birds don't sit still.
No. Are we painting from one of your photos tonight?
Yes.
Oh, how exciting. I love this photo. I love the kind of character that it's got. Beautiful.
Yeah, well, I try. That's really important, I think, Holly, I try and capture, the essence of the bird. Like, sorry, I've got a cold. Well, I had one, it's just a lingering cough, but it's irritating. So, yeah, I like to take my own photos because then I can choose the photo that best talks about what the bird was doing at that time.
Yeah.
And so it's not just the photo, but in my head, I've got the whole behavior of what that bird was up to, whether they were foraging, whether they were preening on a branch, whether they were having a drink, whether they were interacting with others of their own species or other species. All that feeds in. And the photo we're using tonight, that I actually took that in outback Queensland almost a year ago, when I did a trip out there with a bird art and photography friend of mine, and the evening sun was shining on it. So it's a white plumed honeyeater, but it's particularly yellow looking. They're not usually that yellow, but I just thought it was, that light was really beautiful. So I thought it'd be a nice topic for painting tonight.
It's gorgeous. And before we invited everyone else on, I was asking you about your paints and your palettes, and you're giving me such a nice explanation of that. Do you want to show everyone?
Well, I'm a Firstly, I should say that you really do not need this many paints.
It's
You
good to have an
absolutely
exception,
don't.
I reckon.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. But I am obsessed with colour, and they're the tools of my trade as well. So I tend to buy the watercolor. These are watercolor paints, and I tend to buy them in tubes and then squeeze a bit of the paint out into. These are half pans. These smaller ones. That's a full pan, and they're handy this way for taking out into the bush. If I'm doing a really big trip, I'll take tubes as well as this. But if I'm nature journaling or going for a weekend or something like that, I may just take, one of the, or even a smaller setup. Daniel Smith do a really nice set, which I actually brought out. Let's get the right one. Yeah, no, not that one. This one. Because it's I like this set because it's got really good colours for Australia. And you can buy it as a 24 colour set. And see, these greens are fantastic for Australia. I use undersea green a lot, and pyroline green I use in the shadows of foliage. So I use that a lot too. But it's got these great earth colours. Quinacridone orange is a very Australian colour. Burnt sienna. Also, Jane's grey is a really nice neutral colour that you can use in shadows and things like that, or to knock back the brightness of a colour. And then cobalt turquoise it granulates. I don't know if you can, I hope you can see that on the camera, but it's not a smooth like the Jane's grey sort of is a nice even gradation. This is like.
Hold it up a smidge closer for a tick.
Does that work? Can you?
Yeah. You can see how it's got that texture, that like visual texture.
Yeah, that's it, texture. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. And I feel, and you can see the phthalo green next to it.
Yeah.
This is the phthalo green, no texture. And this one, heaps of texture. So the phthalo green is a staining colour, and the cobalt turquoise is a granulating colour.
Sorry, Jane, we just had a question. What was the name of the palette, the brand?
It's Daniel Smith.
Great. Thanks, Kath popped it in the chat too.
I'll show you. Yeah, Daniel Smith. Hold on, I'll put that upside down.
Beautiful. Every time I see things like this, I'm like straight to the art supply store. It's a bit of a
oh dear, it's easy to spend too much money.
Yeah.
If you're going out to buy watercolor, I would suggest that you buy the most expensive that you can comfortably afford, because what that means is the more you spend on paint, the more pigment there will be in that paint, and higher pigment load means brighter, more vibrant colours, and it also means a tiny little paint goes an awful long way. So I actually feel if you can afford the outlay, that it's
worth it for the
it's actually better in the long run. Yeah.
That's good advice, because I think for beginners sometimes it's hard to know when it is worth it to kind of invest in products, and it not always is, but in this case, yes.
It's not always is. And like I remember when I started at art school, and my art teacher would say, oh, just buy the, just use house paints, use the cheapest, just use what you've got that's around you. And sure, sometimes that works. It really works. And I do know there are artists out there who just use house paints. They don't use anything else. But with watercolor, it really doesn't work. And paper is another one. So this is very reasonably priced, 100% cotton paper, and there's paper out there that's 100% cotton, but it's not necessarily good quality. And I'm using this paper on purpose because it's Bahong is the brand.
And that's a good choice.
Because it's that nice sweet spot between not spending too much money but still having a good quality paper.
Bahong.
Yeah, Bahong, yeah. Saunders and Arches are the best. Arches, that's your, goodbye to leaving your kids any inheritance. It's really expensive, but it is superb paper. It is really superb paper. And Saunders is quite a bit cheaper than Arche. And then Bahong is a little bit cheaper again. And all give good results. Yeah.
But that's not to say that anyone using a little kind of scrap torn from a notebook tonight won't still get good results.
No, that's right. And look, you're better off painting something on not optimal materials than not painting anything at all.
That's a nice way of thinking about it.
Yeah. I think also painting's about being in the moment, about it's quite a mindful activity.
And not being too hung up on the perfection maybe sometimes.
Exactly. And I often have to remind myself of that, not to get too perfectionist.
We have a guilty perfectionist in the webinar.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a shocker. Sometimes I've got this note on my studio. I'm probably not allowed to swear on here, but my husband came in one time and said, Jane, they're just shit birds. Now I have this little sign.
They're just shit birds. Sometimes Holly and I should tell ourselves that sometimes too.
So, the other thing I should mention about paper, just going back a moment, is tonight we're using hot press, which is very, very smooth. So there's no texture.
Ooh.
And the reason is because we're doing more of I guess it's sort of more botanical style painting. So it's much more, that's not cold press. Where's my cold press paper? I had some. Andy. Maybe there's some in here.
Oh, they look like pencil sketches, aren't they? We've just had a comment from Kathleen, who is also using pencils tonight, and she says some tips for pencils as we go would be very helpful.
Yes, I had I thought I was organised and had my pencil. So I often combine pencil and watercolour. That's watercolour and pencil combined. That's a nature journaling session. So we've got a list of birds here that I heard and saw while I was making the drawing, and that's more of a general landscape. And then this was some weird fungi in a hole in a tree, like a borer hole, and then a tuft. Oh, and we found these. We worked out after the fact that these tufts of grass was stuffed into a hole by a wasp, and so the wasp gets some prey, lays its egg in the hole with its prey, and then when the larva hatch, it eats the prey, and the grass sort of stuffs it all in, and then when it's ready to emerge, it just somehow gets through the grass. I'm not quite sure how. And then I always put a bit of metadata in there as well, so we've got the grid reference and weather conditions. Yeah,
I am in awe of this combination of science and art. I love it so much. And I'm probably not the only one who, watching you flick through the notebook just then, was just like, wow, look at every page is beautiful. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that's gouache. So, you can use any. And then these were some I'm not very good on plants, so I have friends that come along that help me with the with the plants. And there was a grey box twig, and yes, and some of these are quite mixed media. That's some blind contour drawing, so it's not all perfect and wonderful.
Yeah.
That's a really fun warm up to do. If you Google blind contour drawing, and so the blind bit is when you're not looking at your page, and then the contour bit is when you're not taking your pen off the page. And then sometimes it's just pen drawings. Other times it's, there's lots of granulation in the watercolour.
Beautiful.
Can you see that? Yeah.
Oh,
like watercolour just does. That's why I get excited by watercolour, because it just does this really beautiful stuff. So, and when you flick through a sketchbook like this, not every picture is going to be a winner. Some of them, that's another long story. Got locked in my friend's aviary sketching her budgies with Bridget Farmer, who's another amazing artist. Yeah, anyway. So there's lots of different mediums you can use, and you can use them all at once sometimes as well. Why use one medium when you can use three?
This is an excellent rule for life.
Yes. So I do have my pencils with me today, so that because I'm aware that some people are going to be using pencils, so maybe I can just give a few tips.
Yes.
Same deal goes with pencils, although I am a professional artist, so you don't need to go and buy Caran d'Ache pencils.
We can do maybe a caveat for the whole session that you will give the best advice, and people don't need to follow the best standards if they don't want to. I think that's a good rule of thumb.
Raid your kid's pencil case if
I think whatever you've got to hand who've done that exact thing. So
yeah, good.
We're catering to everyone.
Good. Yes, that's right. All right. So
now, when
art supplies are
watercolors, do you always outline first?
No, actually. I don't know if you can. It's a bit hard to see it actually.
I can see you've got your bird trace there.
Yeah. No, it's the painting behind me on the wall. It's a bit hard to see. But that started with throwing paint at paper, like literally splatting paint on paper. So no, I don't always start like this. If I'm painting a bird, I do, but often backgrounds and is much looser and yeah, much more organic, and it's much more about the textures and the colours in a place. But if I'll tell you a not so secret that for years I was terrified of painting birds, because I'm a bird watcher myself, and I know a lot of people who are bird watchers, and I was like, oh God, what if I get the wrong number of primary feathers, or what, and I was always
fraud.
Yeah, exactly. So I was always really worried about that. Yeah. And then they just came, and then birds just crept into my artwork, whether I liked it or not. No surprise, really. And then in the end, and I also have rescue parrots. They're aviary rescues. And I really don't like birds in cages. I find it quite upsetting. But, these guys have been bred in captivity, and first of all, it's illegal to set them free. And secondly, they'd probably get predated within 5 minutes. I mean, I've got a white budgie. How long is a white budgie going to survive? She's just not. Yeah. That's right. And quite a few of them have come to people because they've got lost, and so they know they can get food from people. So they've come to people. Anyway, so watching them, you soon realise that bird feathers are not perfect. They have bad hair days too. And, they do have feathers that stick out at weird angles now and then, and they molt and they lose feathers. And so that sort of helped that perfectionism calm down a bit.
That's such a great way of reframing it, that like everything's going to look different in nature anyway. So being like fixated on that, no, it must be like so. Sometimes it's okay to just let that go.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So I do try and concentrate on letting that go. And look, not everyone's going to like your artwork, and that's fine too, because yeah, that's fine. So you can't please everyone, so don't try. Just, do what you like to do and what ignites your passion.
I think that is another, not just art advice, life advice, right? We can.
Yeah, actually, you're probably right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, Annie. Yeah. So should we get some painting done? Because
let's get cracking. Let's do it. I'm excited.
Yeah, and normally it would take me probably a full day's work to do this painting. So we're going to try and fast track it.
We're expediting the process.
Yeah. So let's look at the colour wheel to start with, because a yellow bird, so the bird's is predominantly yellow. It's very yellow in this instance. And if we look at the colour, this is a colour wheel that I painted quickly this afternoon. And because I have one in gouache, but it's just nicer if it's in watercolour. So yellow's over here, and we've got red, in this case magenta, because I did it. But if you add a bit of red, a bit of yellow to magenta, you actually get red. So you can see red in here, whereas magenta's here. And then some cobalt blue over here. So they're our three primaries. You've got your red colour, your yellow colour, and your blue colour. And so if you mix your red and blue, you get greens. You mix your magenta or your red tone and blue, you get purples. And if you mix your yellow tone and your yellow colour and your magenta and your red colour, you get orange. And then our bird's predominantly yellow, so it's over in this part of the colour wheel. And then opposite is its secondary, and that's purple. So opposite yellow, you have purple. Opposite your red colour, or in this case, magenta, you've got green. And opposite your blue, you've got orange. And when you're painting shadows, it's handy to use the secondary colour. So we're going to paint our bird in yellow and use purple to put the shadows in. So there's our little reminder there.
This is not something I'd ever realised, but it'll make everything more beautiful.
Yeah, that's some basic colour theory. And I'll just mention, so if you've got really nice paint brushes, don't leave them tip down in your water, because it really wrecks wrecks the nice fine tip on your brush. So my husband's a carpenter, and he made this very handy little jigger, and he just routed some grooves in there, and so I can sit my brush horizontally.
Lovely.
And then you don't want it vertical either, because what happens is pigment goes down and pushes into the ferrule, and that's a good way to ruin your brush too. And the other few materials that I have, so I've also got serviettes. Lynn Kelly's, I gather Lynn Kelly, she put me onto this, is watching tonight, so it's her idea. They always give you too many serviettes in cafes, so the clean ones go into my pocket and I use them for watercolour.
I'm so excited to finally have a use for all of those stacks of serviettes that are just hanging around in my bag.
Yep, that's right. There we go. All right. So I just get my bird up. I'm surrounded by screens tonight.
I know, it's a weird feeling, hey.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing I like to do, you probably noticed, is I swatch everything out. So because then by looking at my palette, if you look at the blues, they just all look dark, and you can't see what you've got. Whereas if I can refer to my swatch, I can see, you know, like cobalt violet hue, this one here, it just looks kind of black in the pan.
Yeah.
So
will you do this every time you buy a new palette or new paints? You'll create a swatch of whatever's going to be in that tray?
Yes, and I love doing that.
It sounds very cathartic.
I get all excited about the new colours.
So beautiful. All the opportunities.
And then I get to swatch them. Yeah. And so a lot of what I do with paint, you can also do with pencils. So I think what we'll do first, I think we might, yeah, actually, I was going to put the purple in first, but then you've got to be very careful not to reactivate it, because watercolour reactivates if you're not careful. Even you've got to let it dry completely. That's the other thing. Don't be tempted to work
when it's too
unless
wet.
You're intending to do wet in wet.
Yeah.
Don't be tempted to try and push the boundaries when it comes to putting dry paint.
Right.
Putting wet paint over a dry paint.
And if
you want it to be dry, well, it means watercolour is activated by water.
Right.
So all the colours in my pan are completely dry. You know, I can put my finger in it and there's no colour. They're completely dry. But with a bit of water,
I see.
You've definitely got colour.
Reactivate.
Yeah, and so you can paint. It has some resilience. So to an extent, you can paint over a dry area of your painting.
Yes.
But you don't want to muck about with it too much. You don't want to spend too much time. You know, if you worry it too much with your paintbrush, it'll reactivate and lift.
Okay. And a brush question: what size and shape of brush are you using?
It's a round brush, but this one has a very nice point on it.
Oh, okay.
It's a silver brush.
Tapers at the end.
Yes. So the fat bit holds a lot of water, and which means that your paint stroke can go for a very long time without exhausting. And then, but it's got a very fine tip on it, so you can do really fine work. I have a selection of brushes, and I just grabbed a Da Vinci 0, and I've got like a Da Vinci number 2, and then these black brushes, the silver brushes. I won't be using the 12. That's what I got there. I won't be using the 12, but I probably will use the number 6.
Yeah.
And these look fluffy and round, but if you do that, they've actually got, you know, a very nice point on them as well, even though when they're dry they look fluffy and round. Yeah, they're beautiful brushes too. Da Vinci Maestro brushes. They're very lovely brushes.
What material is the brush part made of?
The Da Vinci is made of, I think that's sable. And the silver brushes, oops. I have a feeling, I think they might be, I can't remember. There's no reason to get, that you have to, sable brushes are the best brushes, but there's no reason you can't buy synthetic brushes these days. I have a feeling silver is synthetic. Yeah, so if you don't want to buy animal hair brushes, you don't have to. I have a bit of a tussle with myself because I don't really want to buy the animal hair brushes, but on the other hand, the synthetic brushes are basically a plastic. They're a very fancy plastic, but they're a plastic. So
this is a big point of conflict.
Yes.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah. So I guess you've got to work out where you sit personally. But these days, there's very little difference in quality, and you could buy either. The synthetic brushes tend to be cheaper than the natural hair brushes.
It's good that people can then have the option then in that case.
Yeah, that's right. No, it's really good. And sometimes you can get brushes which are a combination of the two.
So you can be guilty on both fronts.
You can be guilty on both fronts if you wish, absolutely. Well, I've got a mixture of brushes. Some of them are synthetic and some of them are not. And some of them have got both synthetic in the bristle, in the brush. So yeah, I'm covering all my bases of disaster.
Comprehension. That's good.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Let's paint a bird, hey? Yes. So I hope you can see that. I drew my bird before we started.
Yeah.
Because I knew we weren't going to have a whole lot of time, really. And when you paint over pencil with watercolour, it sort of fixes the pencil. So you want to, especially because we're doing a light bird, you want your pencil really light. Okay. So I might actually, just by gently rolling the rubber over it, not rubbing, for two reasons, because I only want to lighten it ever so slightly. I don't want to.
So just faint enough that you can still see it, really?
Yeah, that's right. Just so it's a guide. It's a guide. That's all the pencil is it's a guide. It's not. And because a lot of the, except my rubber's really dirty. I should have my kneadable rubber, and I don't. Because you want to, and also watercolor paper doesn't like being, doesn't like the surface being rubbed too much. You can do it gently and you can rub out on it, but you don't want to go vigorously rubbing it because you'll ruin the surface. And I don't know if you can see, but I already did it before the session even started. Look, I did a smudge and that was with water. So it's staying there. So I can't get it off. But things like that, don't worry about it because you just work it into the whole composition and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as mistakes. You can work around them.
I like that.
There we go. All right. So, and if we look at our bird, you can see the light is, have people got the bird on the screen somewhere, Annie?
I hope so, folks. If you are able to have an image of the bird printed or displayed on the screen, this is the best. But I know that some of us might be limited by the fact that we don't have that many devices.
All right. So I'm gonna, if I do this, because I've got devices everywhere, it's a bit crazy. So this is the bird we're painting tonight on my iPad, and I often paint from my iPad. I use it all the time, actually. It's a very handy tool. And so you can see the light is coming from the left-hand side. And we've got a light patch here. So we want to preserve some, that's the ever so lightest yellow. We've got, because it's a white plumed honeyeater, we've got this white plume on its ear, just below its ear here. And then light also hits above the eyebrow there. And then naturally the bird has a yellower head and a paler chest. So we'll keep that in the back of our minds too. Light also hits the leg here and there. And then you've got some light shining, you know, the feathers are iridescent, and you can see the iridescence on the tail feathers down here. So we want to, with watercolor, we paint light to dark. Most other mediums, you paint dark to light. So you put in all your dark bits first, and then your highlights get painted in last, usually with white paint of some description. In watercolor, the paper, that's your highlight, that's your white. And actually what happens with watercolor, and it's worth keeping this in mind. So watercolor is a transparent medium, and light shines through the paint to the white of the paper, bounces off the paper and reflects back at you. So it's almost like your computer screen in that the image is backlit, because even opaque colors in watercolor are not actually, they're just a little bit opaque. They're not actually classed as opaque paint. They're classed as transparent paint. So like yellow ochre and Naples yellow are both opaque in the world of watercolors, but then they're only a little bit opaque, not very, they're still quite transparent. So when we do, so we're going to do a wash all over, and we're going to start with, I'm going to use some Hansa Yellow Light, which is a very cool yellow. I'm just going to clean that. It's a bit grubby from it. Oh, look, I've gone and spread paint into my...
I'm nervous. This is water to paint. Terrifying.
Yeah. No, it's all good. And the nice thing is, if you get it wrong with watercolor, it doesn't matter, because you can lift it. So I'm going to mix a bit of that very cool Hansa Yellow Light. And there's a bit of a more of a golden yellow on my palette already. So something like cadmium yellow deep hue. That's what that color is, mixed in with it.
How would you describe
that
cadmium color to anyone who might not know it?
Yeah, it's a sort of a middle, warm to middle yellow, and it's quite strong, and I've gone and put too much in. So we'll just go and get a bit more Hansa Yellow Light, mix that in. And if you're mixing on a white surface, it's easier to see the colour. And then that's probably quite a lot of paint. And then I'm going to do a wash. Since we've got a yellow bird, I'm going to do the wash over the whole bird, except where those white plumes are. I'm not going to paint on them, and I'm just going to get a bit more.
Leave the white.
Okay. Got some grub in there. I don't know how that got
there.
there.
Gosh.
And
doing it.
Here we go. Going to paint the whole thing yellow, except its legs. Not going to do its legs.
Not its legs or its plumes.
Oops. And there we go over the, if you go over the white, don't worry, just get your serviette and lift it off. Yeah. Remember, it's just shit birds.
It's just shit birds.
It's way too yellow. And we're trying to, so I'm going to lift up some of the colour because it's way too yellow. So I'm dabbing on my, oh, look, and I've dropped some paint there. I'm quite a mucky person.
I think professional artist is a good calling then for a mucky person.
Yeah, although I'm a printmaker as well, and you have to be very...
Can't be mucky,
yeah, you have to be, because otherwise you get ink everywhere, and I mean everywhere. See how I've lifted off that yellow? See how it's much paler, and I was
too preoccupied to watch, Jane. Could you explain how you did it?
Yeah, so all I did was rinse off my brush, dab it on, seal the yellow on my serviette.
Yeah.
So get the excess water off. So my paintbrush it's damp, but it's pretty dry now. And then if you see, I can lift the colour. You see when I...
Oh, I see.
And it's just, it's basic science, because the water is trying to, like osmosis, it's trying to make everything equally wet. So where there's a dry patch, water will try and run to there. So that's all you're doing. And then, and if you're using colour pencils, then you'll be doing a similar thing in that you'll be doing a light shading, just a very light shading like this, and building colour up slowly. So a bit of a very cool yellow, and then I'll go in with a warmer yellow and just build it up slowly. And keep doing that. So it's, the theory is pretty much the same. Oh, look, I've got yellow where it's not meant to be yellow. So I just lift that. Talking and painting, I'm not sure how successful.
I think so far very successful. I've got one yellow bird. I'm feeling very, very accomplished. If I don't achieve anything else tonight, that's it. That's a good
Excellent,
day.
Annie.
Now I'm going to go and grab my serviette because I forgot them and I'm making a mess.
Oh, yes. No, you need your serviette. And then you want to, this leg here is quite light, so you don't want too much yellow there. Just a little bit. And it's actually quite light underneath the bird too. There's a lot of reflected light with bird feathers because bird feathers are iridescent. And I don't know if you can see on this picture, but there's sort of a halo of yellow around the edge of the body of the bird, and that pushes it forward from the background, and it also indicates there's reflected light. So we want to preserve that too. And then we don't want to go, here's our white plume just there. And I've got a hard edge there, so I'm just softening that and dissolving it because I don't want a hard edge there.
And when you say softening, how do you go about doing that?
You're just re-wetting it, reactivating the paint.
Oh, I see. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Oops. I keep hitting with my elbow, and so everything wobbles.
Oh. I'm now engrossed in my bird, so I can't notice the wobbling.
Oh, good. That's lucky to keep my elbow tucked into my side. And it's really quite strong yellow around the cheek here. If building up colour is a nice way to go because you can put a bit down and then decide that's not enough. So you just go back a bit later and put a bit more. And we'll just paint around the bill here.
I've just realised I got really carried away, and my bird is like the yellow of Big Bird with no kind of like gradation or anything in the middle. So we've got maybe a new species over here, but that's all right.
That's funny, Holly. Yeah, the other thing that I carry on about is birds, you know, they're three-dimensional like we are. You basically got a sphere and then an ellipse, and they're three-dimensional, so they have volume. So I'm always going to great pains to create volume in my paintings and make the bird look like it's a solid thing and that it's not just flat.
That kind of mimic the natural like curves and like moves that the animal would have.
Like, yes. And I think that's really important, particularly when this is where watching birds, which probably many of you do, it really helps because you become a bit more aware of that birds do have volume and they do have shape. I want to lift a bit of the yellow here, so I do this without even knowing I'm doing it. It's probably not the best way to do it. You're probably better off using this serviette. But I just dried my brush off and I'm just lifting some of the paint here.
It's not toxic. You can touch it.
Sun. Oh yeah, that's good quality paint is generally speaking, it's non-toxic. So don't drink it. It's very easy. I've made the number one rookie mistake because I've got my glass of water beside my paint pot.
Yeah, I'm doing the exact same thing.
It's very easy to take a swig of the wrong liquid.
All right, we're not in a lab, so we can violate some of those lab practices, I reckon.
Yeah. No, we're not in a lab, but it's still, even though a lot of paint's not toxic, it's still, I wouldn't recommend drinking it. There we go. Might put a bit more yellow over here. And that'll all be in shadow eventually. And it's quite rich yellow under its chin, isn't it? So, and this cheek is a richer yellow there. So I'll put a bit more, another layer of colour there. It's quite pale around this edge of the bird, and through here is quite pale too. I'm just going to soften that edge, so I've just dipped more in my water, dry it for a little bit, and just soften that edge a little bit. Dry again. I'll lift that a little, just sort of blend that in a bit more. Lift that a little. There, that looks a bit better. This shoulder's a bit too yellow, so it's a bit dry, so I'm just worrying it with a damp brush, not too wet, just damp. And that shoulders, I made that, I got a bit excited with the yellow.
I reckon I did too.
Oops. And its wing is really yellow. So,
and we're not adding any browns or anything yet, are we?
We will, but just not yet.
Okay.
I'm just going to use my clean serviette to dab that. That's a really good way of picking up a bit of paint. There we go. That's a bit better. That's a bit too yellow. Feel. There we go. Oh, look down there. That's a bit of a highlight down the, oh, what do you call that bit? The a brain fade. Can't remember. Under the tail there. Oops, sorry. There. That's a bit paler there too. So, like I said, normally, I would spend an entire day painting this little fella, if not more. Sometimes it'll take me 3 days, depending on the species and how much I need to do, how tricky it is to paint. There we go. It's a bit better. And there's actually quite a yellow line down there. And it sort of fades out. The tail coverts. There we go. Okay. So I think you'll be able to see I've got a bit of volume happening there, and all we've done is paint yellow.
Bring it up to the camera for a tick if you can, Jane.
Sure.
Oh, a little closer.
There we go. How's that?
So we can, you mean like kind of down in the lower, like where the brood pouch would be is kind of deeper. And then we've got the, like, the brightness. Yeah.
Yep. And the wings are a bit darker. We've got this pale because the light's coming from this direction.
Yeah.
It's the sun was low in the sky, and it was hitting the bird side on. when I took the photo. See, this is the sort of information you have when you take your own photos.
Yeah.
Not that very often you can work from other artists' photos, but just ask permission first. Very often photographers are very happy for you to work from their photos. And if you don't have the opportunity like I do to take photos of birds, then working from other people's photos is fantastic too. But just make sure that you get permission from the photographer. And more often than not, they'll be happy to let you use their photo. So, yeah, we've got a bit of light hitting the eyebrow there. Yeah, and it's a bit paler underneath the bird. There could well be some reflected light too. That's the thing. Feathers are very iridescent, you know, they're very reflective. And that's another reason I go to quite a lot of lengths to make my birds have volume, because but photography flattens things out and depth of field becomes very shallow. And B, feathers, because they're so iridescent sometimes, reflect light all over the place. And so sometimes you have to not invent so much, but just think about emphasizing the volume of the bird. Okay. Now, it'd be nice for that to dry a little bit. And we might what will we do next? I think we'll add a bit of the slightest touch of purple. And I really mean the slightest touch. And that will give us a brown, because there is some browns in there. And it's quite nice having a limited palette. You end up with a much more cohesive picture rather than using every single colour I have in my palette, which I'm very tempted to do. So we'll add a touch of purple. I'm going to use cobalt violet hue, this one here.
Yeah. So it's almost lavender, would you say?
Yeah. And it's, in this case, it's a granulating colour. Yeah. Which I quite like because it gives texture to the feathers. So you can show feather texture without actually painting it, which the viewer's brain will fill in as text, as feathers for you. You don't need to put every single bit of feather. You can paint like that if you want to, but I don't. I let the viewer's brain fill in the gaps because people are quite clever like that. So I'm going to get a little bit of my cobalt violet hue, which is a schminky colour actually. And I'm going to put it not right near, I'm going to put it over here actually, because that colour there is Moon Glow, and it's a very similar colour to the cobalt violet hue. It's just that there's 3 different colours mixed in, and I don't really want to, I want to keep it fairly pure. So I'm just going to drop a little bit there, rinse my brush, dry my brush, and then
with watercolours, you would always kind of mix colours on a palette or on a surface before putting it on the paper?
No.
Okay.
Not always at all. Mixing it on the palette usually gives you a very even mix, which is really good in some instances. Yeah. But in other, like when I paint this branch, I'll be mixing on the paper because
you want
that way
the texture, the variation.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. And then if you're using colour pencils, you want to get your purple. What have I got here? I've got a violet brown, and you just shade that ever so lightly over your yellow. I mean, really lightly.
Oh, yeah.
But those of us with watercolour, I hope you can see that colour there. It's just made a dirty yellow, really.
I don't know if you can, Jane, but so the connection is really bad, so we can see only very like not crisp. So can you hold it up close to the screen, or does it not really work with the palette?
Oh, that's so annoying, isn't it?
And
I'm on satellite internet, which probably doesn't help. Can you see that? That's
so it is
just
murky,
like
isn't
dirty
it?
yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that I just added the merest bit of purple to that,
Oh.
and it's sort of murky yellow. And so I'm going to use that. I'll lift up my paper a bit, and I'm going to start. So the darkest bits around here,
Yeah.
and I'm just going to start by painting a little bit in around those darkest bits.
How wet is
like
your brush?
Fairly dry. It's not too wet.
Oh, okay.
And I'm just leaving a halo around the edge of the bird, which I'll blend in later. So that's probably, and then under here, there's actually streaks. So I'm going to put in some streaks just with the tip of my paintbrush. And this is where you're starting to see feathers a little bit. And under here, it's really dark. And under here, it's really dark too. But there's some white feathers.
Jane, we've just had a good tip from someone who's watching. I reckon if we have a crack turning off your face camera, off your laptop camera, we might get a bit of quality. Let's see if that works. Sorry to interrupt mid bird texturing, but let's experiment.
That's a good idea, because like the image I see on the screen is awful.
I definitely threw up my hands and I was like, this is what we're dealing with. We're just gonna, but no, there's problem solving.
What if I left the meeting on my laptop? That might work better again, mightn't it?
Yeah, it would, but I would miss you. Nah, that would probably be safe. I would miss seeing your face. I would miss seeing your lounge room. I only have pen.
We've got some barring on the feathers down here on the tail. There's some, not barring, that's the wrong word. You can actually see the filaments. That's what you can see. So I'm just going to paint them in very lightly.
So are you going to paint the individual filaments or more like the broad brushstroke kind of?
No, well, you can really see the filaments. So I'm painting the actual filaments. That one I did too dark. Sorry, I've lost my I'm using my iPad as well. I've got so many devices running. I wouldn't let my husband use the internet tonight.
You mean he's not painting along with us? I'm sorry.
No, funnily enough.
He gets enough.
I'm going to get a bit more purple and add that in along here while it's still wet. And I don't want it too perfect because actually I don't want that dark. I don't want it, using your finger like I did just then is probably not great actually.
Why not?
Just sort of. Well, you're not supposed to touch your paper too much because you have oils in your fingers and it's not good for your paper and it's not good for your paint. And I'm just going to put in some feathers here. Actually, I haven't done that very well. It's sort of, actually, it's not so bad. Not as bad as I thought. Is it easier to see or is it still a abysmal picture?
I actually can't tell a difference. I don't think it changed. But
that's disappointing.
It is disappointing, but we're all here having a crack and we can just operate on the impression of the bird rather than the literal image, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, that's annoying. Oh, well.
Maybe it's a lesson in, what did you say? Letting go of perfection. We can all have
Yeah, that's it. It's just shit birds, people. And I am just putting a few feathers on the forehead.
Could you hold it up and show us what the feathers look like? Is it just like a little stripe?
Yeah, I will. It's just sort of little.
Oh.
Can you see that?
Oh, look. When your bird was blurry from a distance, I couldn't tell how beautiful it already was, and now I'm like, oh, that's a nice bird.
I tell you what, I'll make you all seasick for a moment, and I'll put my camera closer.
Oh yeah,
That's better, isn't it?
it is better.
Oh, I know.
Is that awkward for you? That's all right. Well,
Nah,
that's great.
this might work better because it's. Sorry, if I'm making you seasick.
That's right. I'm focusing on the middle distance.
It'll be that way.
My bird
That's
has had
better, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's much better.
Okay.
You
can't see my paint, but you can see the bird.
We could slide
okay,
paper and paint maybe like 4 centimeters to, yeah. Oh, we still can't, but we can see where you're mixing.
So yeah, so you can. I've got some more of that cobalt violet purple, and I'm mixing it with some yellow again, and then I'm just going to go in a little bit, just in places, to make it feel a bit feathery. And you got to remember to stay relaxed, which I'm really bad at.
Why? What gets you? That's why I have it's just ship thing going on. Too perfectionist. As this became your profession, I can imagine the stress and the pressure changes, right? You can do something you love, but when it is your livelihood, it's not the same.
Well, yeah, and it's just my nature too. And there's really strong shadows, quite dark shadows. So I'm going to pick up some more purple behind the leg here. And by painting that in quite dark, it'll also push that leg forward.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm such a and if the darkest color will be where you lift your brush.
Oh. And that kind of shadow under the rump.
Yeah. It's really dark. We might come in back into that some more. And then the other spot we've got some shadows is under the wing. Just going to slide that way again a bit because I'm sort of painting across myself. Got some quite dark shadow here. And where the primary feathers, where they, in between each primary, there's quite a dark shadow. So we'll just suggest that, and then you can actually see the edge of that primary isn't too, it's sort of a bit fluffy. This is where, bird feathers are not perfect very often. And that feather has a dark bit on it. Not quite sure why. And then up on the shoulder of the bird, we've got, it's more brown. There's some browny feathers in here that almost look like spots. They're not really. And then there's some texture, sort of brown shouldery on the shoulder here. There's some texture there too. The other thing is watercolour dries lighter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it dries lighter than when you put it down and when you paint it on. There's a bit of texture there, a bit on the shoulder, sort of here. And there's a dark little bit just there. Don't know whether you've noticed that. I reckon I have when watching these guys. There's just
that just hint of that line. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And over here we've got, so I'm working wet over dry over here above the plume. So that plume on the on this side of the bird, it's in shadow. It's white, but it's in shadow. So we're going to use cobalt violet again with no yellow mixed in it, just straight cobalt violet and not too strong a shadow, and paint that white plume in.
Kylie's asked us about white-plumed honeyeaters themselves. They're kind of one of those birds that I always think of as a signal that something kind of, that there's decent habitat in kind of urban to semi-urban areas. You don't often find them in what you really think of as urban. In my house, for example, we've got a lot of New Hollands, and New Holland honeyeaters are a little bit bossier than these white-plumed honeyeaters. So whenever you very occasionally see a white-plumed coming through, maybe visiting the bird bath or just stopping on their way to better habitat, our house doesn't have a lot of kind of flowering trees yet. But the New Hollands will chase them off pretty quickly, and you kind of don't tend to see the white-plumed anywhere that you'd see any of the bossier honeyeaters. And they're pretty common across a lot of the continent. I'm going to show my cheating by looking at the map.
Oh, no, they are. I've seen them like from the Pilbara to out. This guy was outback Queensland, Victoria. They're everywhere. And usually associated with river red gums when you're, out in the bush. And that was another reason why I thought I'd paint this fella tonight, because I thought that it might be a bird that a lot of you knew already and were familiar with.
I think for new bird watchers, I reckon they're one of those species that you could live amongst them for a long time and not necessarily notice them, because they are so much up in the canopy and sometimes they are quick. But then once you start knowing what to look for, they're so obvious once you see them.
Yeah. I think so too. I remember, I was seeing them when I lived in Melbourne and not knowing that I was seeing them. So exactly what you're saying, Annie.
I think as you get more and more into birds, that process of being like, oh, wow, I've been seeing this bird, most days for years and years and years. And now I know what it is, and now I get to appreciate it. Now I'm starting to recognize it's a fall. Now I'm starting to see, like, is it solitary? Is it in a group? I love that process as you learn new species.
Yeah, I agree with you, actually. And I can still remember the very first time that I did a positive ID of white-plumed honeyeaters by myself.
Ooh.
And it was in the Pilbara of all places.
It's a very exotic kind of place for maybe a less exotic bird.
Yes, I know. It's a bit crazy, really. And And I particularly remember it. This was particularly gross because it was at, I can't remember the river. I could probably show you on a map, but I can't remember what it's called. And I went to stand on this rock and it sort of moved under my foot, and I thought, that's weird. Looked down and it was actually a cow carcass.
Ew. Yucky.
Yeah.
How fresh are we talking?
Oh, it was fairly fresh. I think because it was in the water, it didn't smell. And
so are you
yeah.
like knee deep in the water at this point?
No, I was just standing on rocks, thankfully.
Oh. Well, you wanted to be standing on rocks.
Yeah. And then this it was a very rocky section of riverbed, and yeah, but this particular rock moved, and yeah, that made me feel a bit.
Do you think that's your most memorable first time IDing a species story?
Oh, now that's a good point, actually, Annie. Maybe it is. Most memorable. What would that be? I don't know. There's quite a few actually that I would say were quite memorable. You know, I remember seeing OBPs in Tassie when I was going hiking, and I was in Melaleuca, and yeah, they were, you know, just because they've got the breeding program at Melaleuca.
What could be more memorable than that? That's pretty special.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, stuff the hike. The OBPs were much more interesting.
Very, very special and exciting.
Actually, Tassie's pretty cool because, you know, seeing ground parrots and things while you're hiking, that's pretty exciting. Okay, now on this chest, there's just in places, I'm going to suggest some feathers. Actually, I probably want a smaller brush, to be honest. I'm making life hard for myself using that big brush. So now I've got my number 2. I think this might be a Neef brush. It's a sable brush. Neef make very reasonably priced but good paintbrushes.
Ooh. And are we still working with the same colour combo, the purple and the yellow together?
Yeah. We're going to be pretty much doing that over the entire bird.
And this is what you meant about not having too many different kind of colours.
Yeah.
Oh, Jane, it's 8:15. I don't know how that happened, but
oh yeah, it does. Quick, let's do the eye.
Yes, let's do the eye.
If we do the eye, now normally I like to mix my own black. So, and normally I would use the colours I'm using, and yellow and purple do make black. However, I'm going to use indigo today.
Yellow.
I'm going to use indigo because it's like super dark. See, look at that, really dark. And I'm going to add a little bit of magenta.
And why not just the black that's in the palette?
Because and somehow I got a whole lot of water in that, which is, I'm probably rushing. That doesn't work. I'm going to remix it over here.
Well, you did say that this normally, you know, you'd leave it a day, 2 days, 3 days. So we are rushing.
Yeah, we are rushing. But the other thing is I had a droplet of water on my brush and it rolled down.
Oh.
Something to be aware of. And it got me.
Oh.
So let's do that. And that will make it sort of a purpley black, which works because we've been using purple. And then,
what 2 colours were they again, sorry?
I used quinacridone magenta and indigo.
Okay. Could you maybe show us the palette quickly?
Yes. That's indigo, this one here. And quinacridone magenta is this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And when you mix them together, they actually make a kind of a purple. And we've been using purple, you see, so it works quite nicely. And then, and you very often have to do a few layers. So the reason you don't use black is that it makes for a very dead, flat colour.
Oh. And so with the eyes, we'd go for it.
Yeah, so you use dark colour.
And you're not too wet on the brush, are you?
No, you're fairly dry and you're doing really fine work.
I think that's my problem. I'm too generous with the water.
And if you're using pencils, sharpen your pencil. And this is when your bird comes alive.
And if we don't get to the background, can we chat for a second about what advice you'd give for someone painting backgrounds and foliage and things like that?
I'm making a mess of this eye.
My bird's had a really hard life. Poor thing.
Oh yeah, I'm not making a good thing. That eye's not great. I don't want to muck with it too much. I'd be better off leaving it and coming back to it. So we'll go and mess up this eye instead now. Remembering shit birds, so you don't get too tight about it. I think I'm too tight. And to be honest, I'm not great at talking and painting.
I think you've done a good job.
Thanks, Annie.
Yeah, I have to say that though, don't I? I couldn't agree with you.
Well, you could actually. I wouldn't mind. I'd be okay with that.
I think that's another thing that, like, it's nice to remember, especially for people who don't often take the time to paint or who might not have the perfect materials. It's like, probably tonight it doesn't matter how beautiful or realistic this bird is. It's just that we're sitting here and doing it.
Yeah. True. That's very true. Now my brush is a bit dry and it's somehow got a weird eyelash thing going on here that I don't want. I can pick that up later. Yeah, it's getting there. It's actually looking at you now.
Mine's looking in two different directions.
So you see how I made that mistake and I've just lifted the purple up. That I don't want my brush too wet. I just want to lift that bit of purple there. And it's done it enough. Yeah, that's okay. And then then you can use the same colour, just watered down a little bit for the bill. Maybe a bit more indigo in it. And then we'll try and get the suggestion of the bill in. Once again, you've got to preserve, you need the nostril. It's important that you have your bird has a nostril. Can't have a bird that can't breathe. And you've got to look really closely at what a bill does. Like bills hinge from over near the eye.
There's that long spread.
Yeah. There's, normally I teach how to paint birds in a 6-week course, and even that's pushing it. So it's sort of not surprising we're struggling a bit tonight to get it all done. And I normally go through a bit of bird anatomy because for me, it really helps. Understanding the anatomy really helps with
how the structure
painting.
like affects movement and things like that, and the way the bird would perch. Yeah.
And how, the bird's leg doesn't just attach to the body here, its pelvis is in here and it attaches up here. So there's a joint that goes there, then it goes out here, and then it goes there. And you can't see that under all the feathers. If you think about, if you eat meat, think about your roast chicken and what that does. And I'm just using some of this eye colour down on the chest here because it helps sort of tie it together. And then these really dark bits can have some of that colour I used in the eye too. So it's getting there. We haven't done a whole lot on these tail feathers. Oops. A bit lumpy. And my brush is getting dry now, which is quite good. So I'm using the fact it's getting dry and using dry brush, which is quite good for suggesting. Yeah, it's good for suggesting feathers, and it's the paint doesn't come down in a nice smooth flow because there's not enough water. It's all drying out. And now I'm going to go, and so it sort of goes down where it sort of catches. It's textural. You get a bit where it comes out, a bit where it doesn't. So I'm going to go back into the bill and just do some of the darker bits there. And if you can get the dark bit, there's a dark bit on the tip of the bill, and that'll throw the bill forward by making that bit extra dark. So it'll point it out towards you. That bill needs a lot more work, but because it's got things like reflected yellow under here, up off the chest, and it's got a little bit of sort of reflected yellow there too. It's not completely. You sort of get the idea.
Oh my gosh.
And then I would actually, these look a bit isolated and a bit weird, these feathers. So I would just put some, sort of connect them a bit. And at the same time, thinking about the volume of the bird and thinking about making it like it's got volume. Painting or drawing spheres and squares as cubes and things is a really good way of practicing your volume. And basically, if you can paint a cube, a sphere, a cone, and a pyramid, you've pretty much got everything covered in nature.
Oh.
Yeah. So if you can If you think about it, a tree trunk, for example, is a load of cylinders all stacked up on each other. Sure, they go up, sort of point off at different directions in places, but it's basically a load of cylinders stacked up on each other. So if you can get those sorted out, if you can paint those then or draw those,
and everything else follows.
A bunch of cylinders, then you just stack them on each other and you've got your tree.
Now, I'm conscious of time and I really, really hate to rush us, but I know that some people might need to leave at 8:30. So is there any kind of like parting wisdom or tips for finishing a piece like this that you'd want to share? I know it's a pity that we don't all get to do it together.
No, enjoy yourself. I think that's the main one, is have fun and enjoy yourself. And paint for you. Don't paint for anybody else. Paint for you. I think it's some of the most important things to keep in mind. I would be here all day painting this. So it is a bit. So yeah, give yourself time and give yourself this mental and space as well. And it everything takes practice, I suppose, too. And treat yourself to some nice art materials, because it's so fun unboxing new art materials.
That does sound like fun. What kind of colours would you use for things like branch and legs and background for anyone who does want to keep going?
Yeah. Or the legs, I would use the same yellow.
Yeah.
And the where to put my brush there? The down this part of the leg is quite brown, so you could add a little bit of magenta, just the slightest little bit to your yellow, and a little bit of, and make a brown that way, but it's slightly warmer. And so you could paint your legs in like that. Just quickly put a leg in. So start like that, nice and light again. And the claws are really important. I think feet and bills, they're hard to paint and they take quite a lot of practice, but I think they're really important because they tell you so much about the ecology of the bird.
Absolutely.
And, sometimes you see beautiful bird paintings and then the feet are just fluffed. And
just like 3 sticks.
Yeah. And it just, for me, I don't know, maybe because it's my zoology head, I'm not sure, but it just really lets it down. So that's where I would start, just by doing that. And then build up layers like we have on the body of the bird. And then for the branch, what would I do? It's very yellow like the bird, because it's got that evening sun. So I would make a brown with all those colours we've been using. I'm mixing it now. And a lot of water. And let the not be too perfect. Just let it do its thing a bit, and then keeping in mind once again that it's a cylinder on its side, and so keeping that in mind when you paint it, so that it looks three-dimensional and it's not flat. So let's quickly put some. It looks a bit weird because it's so yellow, but that's what it was, because it was in that gorgeous evening light. And then I'd get some of that indigo and roughly drop it in. It's not quite the same as the photo because I'm making it up a bit because I think it looks a bit better. And you'll have some shadow. I'm painting this a bit quick, which doesn't do any favours to the poor bird. But just drop it in and get some texture happening. Probably did a bit much there. Look, I've actually got, by mistake, I didn't know I was going to do that. Some magenta is quite strong, but I don't care about that. Often there's shadow underneath the bird, and in this case there's some foot shadow here that's quite dark. You can see that that's the shadow from the foot, and it's a little bit in between the toes there. This foot is throwing a bit of shadow there too. So that's important to get in because that attaches your bird to the branch. And that's important.
I feel like there's a very different feeling when you're painting quickly. And I know that for some people it might not be fun, but for me sometimes there's a real satisfaction in just getting something out there and knowing that it can be really rough.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. You end up with some lovely sort of happy mistakes, like not mistakes, but just happy chance. Chance is one of your friends, especially with watercolor. Chance is a friend. So when you're painting a cylinder, oh sorry, I hit the elbowed the stand again. When you're painting a cylinder, you're going to have like a termination line. So that's your darkest point, and it's going to be close to this bottom edge, but there's always some reflected light coming up at the bottom edge, so that's always a bit lighter. And then so it goes from light to very dark very quickly, and then it'll fade out to quite light along the top edge here.
When you reach a good point, could you show us up close to the camera again?
Yeah, it looks a bit, I feel like it looks a bit yellow. It's a bit weird. Oops, there's a bit of a delay.
Wow.
So, and if you just give watercolor a chance to do its lovely, delicious thing, then it'll paint for you. It'll paint for you. So I'm going to leave that and just, and you don't need to, paint every little detail in. Like your brain will fill that in for you. Like there's some quite nice things happening in here. And that's just watercolor being watercolor.
After this session, we take a photo of that, and then we can share it with everyone so they can get a bit of a like higher resolution take on it.
Sure.
Oh, look at the texture on the shoulder.
Yeah, so I've just in places suggested, look, if this was going to be a proper, well, it's not a proper painting, but if this was going to be not just it's a demo, and if I was going to work this up properly, I would honestly spend all day on it, because it's looking very sort of rough and unfinished to me at the moment, but at least it suggests a bird, like it's getting there. Yeah. And if you're feeling, I've got a good hot tip. If you're feeling a bit despondent about it, put the eyes in and suddenly you go, oh, hi, there you are.
Hello. Now, I'm finding that my colours are a lot more kind of washed out than yours. Do you think that's user error, or do you think it's about the quality of the product I'm using?
It's probably you showed me at the beginning. You showed me. No. At the beginning, you showed me what paints you were using, and I suggest that that's part of the issue.
So, like you said, this is you get what you pay for.
Yeah, exactly. You do get what you pay for. And, I'm using really, really good quality artist grade inks, paint, and that makes a big difference.
But
it makes a big difference.
Depends what you're doing it for. So I'm doing it to have a nice time. So I can probably tolerate having a bit less.
It's when people are getting disappointed in their results that I say,
think about these options.
Yeah. Buy nice paper, nice brushes, and nice paint. And buy the best you can afford. That you can comfortably afford. I say comfortably afford because there's no point buying it and then being too terrified to use it. That's completely counterproductive.
I'm looking at mine. It's very, hold on, let's see if I can make it. Look at it. It's a bit blurry.
Yes, it's beautiful.
And I think everyone's is beautiful in a different way. I reckon the camera's doing it good justice though. Someone's asked if there's a way we can all share these. Holly, I wonder if we can start an Instagram thread. I think that would be really cute. I know not everyone uses Instagram, but we can pop ours up, and then anyone who also wants to share can.
I think that would be amazing. I really want to see everybody's work.
Me too.
I'll do a maybe I'll finish this off tomorrow afternoon, and I'll do a where we got to tonight, and then a where I get to tomorrow, maybe.
Oh, I love that idea. I'll do the same.
Because it'll be a bit more. It should look a bit better. Because I haven't even got to the tail yet, and I haven't put a background in at all.
Would you often put a background
in? If I'm doing a study, no, not necessarily. If I'm doing a painting, yes, because I like my birds to be in a habitat. And
yes.
the habitat's very important to me. Yeah.
It's your ecology brain.
Yes, it is, exactly. It's my ecology brain. And I was going to say, if anyone wants to have a look at what I get up to, I have both a Instagram page and a Facebook page, and that's a good place to look at my work if you're vaguely interested.
And your Instagram, I did link it in the event, but is it Jane _Rusden?
No, it's just Jane Rusden.
Okay.
The Jane, I can't get rid of that _Rusden one. That's Jane Rusden one. That's very annoying.
Oh,
I can't get rid of it.
Maybe I've shared someone else on Instagram.
If you just look, Jane, if you just search Jane Rusden, you should find it. All right. Yeah. Oh, I could have done that too. Anyway.
This can be Jane Rusden.
Yeah. And then Facebook, I'm just Jane Rusden also on Facebook. And you'll see the same stuff, so don't bother looking at both. That'll be boring.
Now, everyone who wanted a recording, what we will do in the next few days is pop it up on YouTube. And then, I'll share the YouTube page now, so next week you can have a look at, and then you will find it there. And we've got all sorts of previous webinars on there as well, but none of them are quite like this, but they're all interesting in their own ways.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't talk a whole lot. We talked a little bit about the ecology of white-plumed honeyeaters, but not a whole lot, which would have been nice. But,
well, maybe next time, if we do a next time, we'll know. We'll work it all in together. We'll do science chat. We'll do painting chat. I'm excited. I reckon we might need to wrap it up there, though. Thank you, Jane, so much for your time. I really appreciate this, and I think it's such a nice chance for everyone to get out and paying attention to nature. Someone's asked if you do any online classes.
Oh, sorry. No, I haven't. I have done classes, but not online, no.
If anyone is ever passing through Castlemaine and has the opportunity to jump into one of Jane's nature journaling sessions or any of your longer classes, couldn't recommend it enough. I know that we were just talking about how I desperately need to go out and try one too. And is there anything else you wanted to say before we wrapped up for the night, Jane or Holly?
Yeah, nature journaling is first Sunday morning of the month, except August, because in Victoria it's just too cold. And so August we don't, and then January falls on like just after New Year, so everyone's nursing silly season excesses. But every other month, it's the first Sunday morning of the month, and somewhere in and around Castlemaine in a nice bush setting. All the information's on the BirdLife website on our BirdLife Castlemaine district page with all our events.
Oh,
and our
so
bird
that
walks too.
I'll see you all. Was it first Sunday in September? We'll be there, all of us. It's going to be a busy one that
yes.
day. Alrighty. Thank you so much, everyone. We will post that recording in a few days. Karen in the chat has put up such a beautiful image of her art, and in the next few days, I reckon we'll all get to see maybe on Instagram everyone's stuff. Oh, have such a nice night, everyone. I'm going to close the session now. And thanks for joining.